Story 1: The Shadow in the Hallway. I had just moved into my first apartment, a small one-bedroom on the ground floor. It wasn't in the best part of town, but it was all I could afford. The neighborhood was usually quiet, but that night I was on edge. I'd been hearing strange noises for a few days, like soft shuffling outside my door, but I brushed it off as paranoia. One night, around 2 a.m., I was half asleep when I heard a faint knock on my door. My heart started racing. I stayed in bed, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But then I heard it again, louder this time. My heart pounded in my chest as I tiptoed to the door, pressing my ear against it. There was nothing but silence on the other side. I was about to turn back when I heard a soft creak from the hallway. My blood ran cold. I peered through the peephole and saw nothing but darkness. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a shadow moving slowly toward my door. Panicking, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I whispered my situation to the operator, trying to stay calm. The shadow stopped in front of my door, just standing there. I couldn't see a face, just the outline of a tall figure. The police arrived in what felt like hours, but it was probably only minutes. As soon as they knocked on the door, the shadow disappeared. The officers searched the building but found no one. They told me to be careful and left, but I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I found deep scratches on my door, like someone had been trying to force their way in. I moved out the next week, and to this day, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't called for help. Story 2: The Creeper in the Basement. I was house-sitting for my aunt and uncle while they were on vacation. They lived in a big old house that always felt a little creepy, especially at night. It was a stormy evening, and I was curled up on the couch watching TV when the power suddenly went out. I fumbled for my phone to use the flashlight and decided to check the basement, where the circuit breaker was. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, the beam of my flashlight flickering in the dark. The basement was even creepier than the rest of the house, with old furniture covered in sheets and cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. I found the circuit breaker and flipped the switches, but the power didn't come back on. Frustrated, I turned to go back upstairs when I heard a noise. It sounded like someone breathing, shallow and raspy. I froze, my flashlight shaking in my hand. I slowly turned toward the sound and saw a pair of eyes reflecting the light from the far corner of the basement. My blood turned to ice. There was a man standing there, hunched over and watching me. My brain screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The man took a step toward me, and I snapped out of my shock. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind me. I locked it and grabbed the landline phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. The police arrived quickly and searched the basement. They found signs that someone had been living down there, dirty blankets, food wrappers, and tools. But the man was gone. My aunt and uncle were horrified when they returned and changed all the locks. They never did find out who the man was or how long he'd been living in their basement. Story 3: The Stranger in the Window. It was late, and I was home alone, studying for an exam. My parents were out of town, and I had the house to myself. I'd always been a little paranoid about being alone, but I tried to shake it off. I was in my room, going over notes, when I felt like I was being watched. I glanced toward the window, and my heart nearly stopped. There was a face staring at me through the glass. I couldn't see much detail, but I knew it wasn't anyone I recognized. The figure just stood there, eyes locked on mine. I was frozen with fear, unable to move or look away. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to grab my phone and call the police. I whispered into the phone, too scared to make a sound. The figure didn't move, just kept staring. The police arrived and searched the yard, but the figure was gone. They told me it was probably a prank, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more sinister. A few days later, I found footprints in the flower bed outside my window. They were deep, like someone had been standing there for a long time. I never felt safe in that house again. Story 4: The Voice in the Dark. I live in a small, quiet town where nothing much ever happens. One night, I was home alone, reading in bed. My parents were out for the evening, and I had the house to myself. Around midnight, I heard a noise downstairs, a faint creak, like someone was walking around. I figured it was just the house settling, but then I heard it again, closer this time. I got out of bed and crept to the top of the stairs, listening. That's when I heard it, a voice. It was low and muffled, like someone was talking to themselves. I couldn't make out the words, but it sent chills down my spine. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator. I was terrified that whoever was down there would hear me. The voice continued, getting louder, like the person was coming closer. The operator told me to stay on the line and find a place to hide. I ducked into my closet, heart pounding in my chest. I could still hear the voice, now at the bottom of the stairs. The police arrived minutes later, but it felt like hours. They searched the house and found the back door wide open, but no one inside. They told me I'd done the right thing by calling, but it didn't make me feel any better. I spent the rest of the night at a friend's house and didn't sleep a wink. Story 5: The Footsteps in the Attic. My family had just moved into an old house on the outskirts of town. It was charming, but had its quirks, creaky floors, drafty windows, and an attic that made strange noises at night. My parents chalked it up to the house settling, but I wasn't so sure. One night, I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I heard footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate steps, like someone was walking back and forth in the attic. I told myself it was just the house, but the footsteps continued. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was up there. I finally worked up the courage to get out of bed and wake my dad. He grabbed a flashlight and headed up to the attic while I waited at the bottom of the stairs, heart racing. He searched the attic but didn't find anything unusual. He told me to go back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. The next night, I heard the footsteps again, even louder this time. I knew I wasn't imagining it. I didn't tell my parents this time. Instead, I decided to check it out myself. I crept up to the attic, my heart pounding with each step. When I reached the top, I saw nothing but darkness. But then I heard a faint rustling from the corner of the attic. I pointed my flashlight toward the sound and froze. There, huddled in the corner, was a man. He was dirty and disheveled, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. I ran downstairs and called the police. They arrived quickly and arrested the man. It turned out he was a drifter who had been living in the attic for weeks, sneaking down at night to steal food. I never felt safe in that house again. Story 13: The Face at the Window. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other. It was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and kids played outside until dark. My parents were no different. We felt safe, so we never worried much about security. One summer night, I was up late reading in bed. My room was on the ground floor, and I had the window cracked open to let in the cool breeze. The night was quiet, the only sound being the occasional chirp of a cricket. As I was engrossed in my book, I suddenly had the eerie feeling that I was being watched. I looked up from the page and glanced at the window. At first, I saw nothing, but then my heart nearly stopped. There, pressed against the glass, was a face. I couldn't make out all the details, but I could see enough, a pair of eyes staring straight at me, a twisted smile on the lips. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or scream. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to snap out of my shock. I jumped out of bed and ran to my parents' room, screaming for them to wake up. My dad rushed outside with a flashlight, but by the time he got there, the person was gone. The police were called, and they searched the area but found no trace of the intruder. They said it was probably a prank, but I knew better. I never slept with my window open again, and I spent the rest of that summer in fear that the face at the window would return. Story 14: The Unknown Visitor. It was a chilly autumn evening, and I was home alone, waiting for my boyfriend to come over. We had plans to watch a movie, so I was curled up on the couch, scrolling through my phone. The sun had just set, and the house was starting to feel a little too quiet. I was lost in thought when I heard a noise at the back door, a soft, almost hesitant knock. It startled me because we never used the back door. It opened into a small, fenced yard, and visitors always came to the front. I hesitated, my heart starting to pound. I slowly walked to the kitchen and peered out the window that overlooked the backyard. My breath caught in my throat when I saw a shadowy figure standing by the door, just out of the light. The person knocked again, louder this time. I didn't recognize them, and something about the way they stood there, so still and silent, sent chills down my spine. I backed away from the window and grabbed my phone, texting my boyfriend to hurry over. When I looked back out, the figure was gone. I felt a wave of relief, thinking maybe it was just a neighbor. But then I heard footsteps on the front porch. I quickly locked the back door and moved to the front window. There was no one there. My boyfriend arrived a few minutes later, and we checked the yard together, but the person had vanished. I never found out who they were or what they wanted, but the memory of that knock at the back door still haunts me. Story 15, The Attic Intruder. I had just moved into a new house, a fixer-upper that needed a lot of work. It was old, with creaky floors and a drafty attic, but it was affordable, and I was excited to make it my own. I spent my first few nights there painting and unpacking, getting used to the new space. One night, after a long day of work, I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak as it settled. I was drifting off when I heard a noise from the attic, a faint rustling, like something was moving around up there. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the wind or maybe a squirrel that had gotten in. But then I heard it again, louder this time, like footsteps. My heart started to race as I listened, frozen in place. The footsteps grew louder, moving across the attic, directly above my bedroom. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight and a heavy wrench from my toolbox, trying to steel my nerves as I climbed the stairs to the attic. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and I shone the flashlight into the darkness. The attic was mostly empty, just a few old boxes and some furniture covered with sheets. But then, in the corner, I saw movement, a figure crouched behind some boxes. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest, and ran down the stairs, locking the attic door behind me. I called the police, trying to stay calm as I explained what had happened. When the police arrived, they searched the attic and found evidence that someone had been living up there, blankets, food wrappers, and a makeshift bed hidden behind the boxes. The intruder was gone, but they had clearly been there for some time. I moved out the next day, unable to shake the feeling that someone had been watching me, living above me, all those nights.